Ashley covered herself with her hands from a strong gust of wind. As soon as it was all over, she saw a guy covered in blood from head to toe, slowly walking towards her. But before he had time to walk even 10 steps, his strength left him, and he began to fall to the ground. Ashley stood next to him, looking puzzled, trying to figure out who he was. Sometime later, Killian opened his eyes and saw the walls of a hospital room in front of him. Rising up on the pillows, he immediately noticed the girl sitting next to him. When she turned around, the hero saw Ashley's familiar face. This surprised him greatly. So, slightly embarrassed, he asked what she was doing here. The girl said that she brought him here because he was badly injured in a fight with an orc. All his muscles were torn and his ribs were broken. Then she leaned forward a little and asked how he felt now. When she moved closer to him, Killian flinched in surprise. Suddenly, Ashley placed her palm on his head and stroked it gently, causing the guy to blush deeply with her actions. Killian looked at the girl with confusion, embarrassed by what was happening. Noticing his flushed face, Ashley moved even closer with a worried expression and hesitantly suggested that he had a fever. After the guy assured her that he was completely fine, she sat back and, remembering that they had not introduced themselves, asked his name. The hero told her his name, but her question seemed strange to him, since she should have already known his name from personal data when he was placed in this ward. Eli looked away and said that she would like to hear it from him in person. Her words led him to speculate that she was able to read minds, which wouldn't be surprising since one of her abilities was an S-rank heightened sixth sense. Ashley interrupted his thoughts by saying that she had a proposition for him. Killian looked at the girl in front of him in surprise and asked what proposal she was talking about. The hero immediately began to think of options in his head about what she might need from him, but he never expected that she would offer to join her team. Raising one eyebrow in confusion, he asked cautiously if this decision had been made because he had fought that orc. Ashley ignored the question and sighed, asking him what he thought about an annual salary of 1 billion won. The amount the guy heard shocked him. He even wondered if he misheard. However, the girl's next words, that in addition to the amount she had just announced, he would receive loot from monsters, divided equally between the team members, were too difficult even for him to resist such favorable conditions. Noticing the shadow of doubt on the hero's face, Ashley shared what she knew about his younger sister suffering from a blood disease and promised to take on the costs of her hospitalization, so he would no longer have to rack his brain over paying bills. The conditions put forward to him were too good, and that was what bothered him, because you can't get something for nothing. Without hiding his suspicions in his eyes, Killian asked what he had done to deserve this. Ashley was silent for a moment, but then replied that she had a request that only he could fulfill. She then looked up at him and asked him to develop a strategy for all the monsters she would hunt in the future. A few hours later, evening came and the huntress left. Killian lay on his bed after she left and thought about his answer for a long time, doubting the correctness of his choice. He then immediately refused her request. Ashley accepted his refusal and said that she still owed him for saving her life, so as a thank you, she decided to repay the debt by paying his sister's medical bills. Looking at the girl lying next to him, he decided to check the capabilities of the God's channel once again, because the hero had already managed to make sure that the abilities he received there were real, and with its help, he too could become a high-ranking hunter. Killian couldn't afford to give up on finding a cure for Sasha's terminal illness. Thinking about this gave him the idea that since modern medicine was powerless here, he could try to heal his sister with the help of the God channel, having obtained high-class abilities. But there was one problem he needed to deal with. The medicinal ingredients and special items used for treatment were very expensive. The hero sighed heavily and picked up his cracked laptop from the shelf, deciding that in order to earn money, he should first finish editing the 50 million won video. Before cutting the frames, he reviewed the recorded video again. At one point, something caught the guy's attention. Killian rewinded to the moment where he asked Ashley how much her guns were worth. This gave him the idea that maybe he too should start making weapons and selling them. Thanks to such work, he will be able to earn billions in the shortest possible time. With these thoughts in mind, he went to the God's channel and began to scroll through the channels, worried that he had only one subscription he could make. A couple of minutes of searching later, he came across a video of Hephaestus giving lessons on making and upgrading weapons. Killian decided to take a chance and subscribe to this channel. His face showed shock and disbelief when he received a message that by subscribing to Hephaestus's channel, he had managed to obtain the SS-rank God Metallurgy ability. After this message disappeared, a video of Hephaestus forging a weapon started playing on the screen, saying that when creating a weapon, One should not be afraid of failure and should be prepared for the weapon to be destroyed at any moment. Our hero's face was distorted with bewilderment and discontent. Hephaestus's words about a possible failure made him regret the subscription he had made. A couple of days later, he was allowed to go outside, and the first thing he did was go to the playground on the hospital grounds. Having occupied one of the turnstiles, Killian began his usual pull-ups. The nurses passing by couldn't help but notice the beautiful body of their new patient. Killian half listened as they talked about how surprised everyone was at his remarkably quick recovery. When one of the girls said that the doctor had decided to discharge him tomorrow, the hero glanced at her in surprise. He had not expected it to happen so soon. Deciding that he needed to start training even harder before he was discharged, he picked up the pace, gradually increasing his mastery of superhuman strength. He was afraid that if he continued to use this ability, all his muscles would be torn again and again. So he couldn't slack off and put in maximum effort. Suddenly, a joyful Sasha appeared from behind his back and called out to her brother. When she asked him if he was really being discharged tomorrow, the hero scratched the back of his head and uncertainly replied that most likely it was. Hearing this, the girl sighed with relief and admitted that as soon as he got to the hospital, she was worried that his condition could be very serious. Then she looked down and asked why he was being discharged after a week. When the doctor said that it would take at least a month to recover, Killian smiled, knowing his sister was upset that he was being discharged first. He walked up to her and gently stroked her head, telling her that she shouldn't shy away from treatment while he was away, and that she didn't have to worry about money anymore. To which Sasha replied that she already knew that she was getting free treatment thanks to Sister Ashley. The address he heard from the huntress greatly shocked the hero. Sasha explained that Ashley herself allowed her to call her that, explaining that despite her strong desire, she does not have younger brothers and sisters. A shocked Killian asked his sister when she had managed to meet this girl. When Sasha told him that Ashley came to visit from time to time, our hero became even more perplexed and asked why he had never seen her in that case. To this, his sister replied that the huntress comes at a time when he is training and asks about his condition before leaving. After listening to Sasha, Killian was amazed at the girl's ardent desire to recruit him, because now she should be up to her neck in the activities of a hunter. Meanwhile, standing Sasha smiled cheerfully, interpreting this situation in her own way, and looked at her brother, assuming that Ashley's sister was doing this because she had romantic feelings for him. In response to this, Killian looked away and said that this was absolutely not true. When Sasha began to convince him otherwise, the hero turned away and asked her to stop saying these useless things and go back to the ward, and he needed to visit one place. He was determined to start making money as quickly as possible. Sometime later, after changing his clothes, he went down into the dungeon alone to hunt monsters. He clenched and unclenched his fist a few times, hoping that the consequences of using his powers wouldn't be as severe this time. At some point, he heard the sound of approaching footsteps and immediately became wary. Turning around, Killian saw a small group of low-ranking goblins. They armed themselves with the stones they had picked up and began throwing them at the hunter standing in their way. The hero deftly dodged the stones, avoiding being hit. Although he knew that goblins always acted in groups, even so, there were more of them than he had expected. Meanwhile, the goblins, realizing that they couldn't achieve anything with stones, took up their weapons and ran at the guy at once. Now Killian had to dodge the deadly swings of the weapon. But thanks to the low speed of these monsters, this was not difficult for him, and even the opportunity to strike back presented itself. The goblin didn't even have time to dodge when the guy's fist touched him, tearing his body in half with one blow. The next moment, drops of blood splashed onto Killian's face, surprised by such an easy victory. Seeing the death of their kinsman, the other goblins were no longer so quick to attack. Killian, realizing that he was stronger than he initially thought, confidently moved towards them. Stopping a couple of meters away from them, he smiled confidently and defiantly told the monsters to attack as a group. Having dealt with all of them, he went to the next location of his plan. The hero dumped the carcasses of the dead goblins into a pile near the house. Afterwards, he asked the man who came out how much he could make from these goblins, to which Victor angrily replied that he had asked to bring him ingredients and not some pathetic body parts. After scolding Killian, the man who owned the forge sighed tiredly and told the hero to follow him if he still wanted to learn how to smelt weapons. 10 minutes later, Victor began his training. The hero came to him specifically because he knew that this man had dedicated his entire life to this craft, and by the age of 40, had become an incredibly talented A-rank awakened. Without looking up from his work, the blacksmith explained to Killian that having good materials does not mean that you can easily create A or S rank equipment. The hero could not take his eyes off him throughout the entire process. As soon as Victor finished, he handed the hammer to him, saying that it was now his turn to show his skills. Afterwards, he stepped back and began to watch this strange boy closely. At first, he was surprised that he came and did not demand that she make him a weapon, or try to ask to be an apprentice, and did not even ask to join his guild, but simply asked to lend him the workshop in exchange for rent. Victor decided to make this concession out of curiosity, to see how far this guy could go, and he was completely sure that Killian would not stay here for long, because metallurgy is not such an easy skill as in the game. Even it took him 20 years to reach his current level. So, while the blacksmith was busy wondering when our hero would give up and leave this place, he set to work. After a few moments, the displeasure on Victor's face turned to surprise, and he cast aside his previous thoughts about his new ward. Sometime later, the door to the forge swung open, and a red-haired girl with a huge bag on her shoulders walked inside, loudly announcing her return to the master. While cleaning his sword, Victor raised his head, and noted that to his surprise, she had returned quite quickly, to which the girl only smiled. Afterwards, she confidently stated that as a representative of Company C, which deals only with the best goods, she could not afford any delays or hesitations, especially if she was dealing with the best blacksmith in the country. With a confident smile on her lips, she pulled off her backpack. Then she put it down on the table and started unpacking it, saying that she managed to get all the ingredients that he ordered last time. Alice tried not to pay attention to the sounds of blows echoing throughout the forge and reported one more piece of news. But when all her words were drowned out by the clatter of the iron, her patience began to quickly leave her, and the girl became more and more irritated. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, she turned towards Killian and angrily shouted that he should be quieter when other people were talking about important things. Then she folded her arms across her chest and cast a dissatisfied glance at the box of swords, trying to understand what this idiot was doing. Alice approached and took out one of the swords and examined the curved blade with many serrations, after which she asked with disdain in her voice whether it could be called a weapon at all. When Victor rose from his seat and asked why she thought so, the girl replied that the blade was too dull and the shape was rough, and such a sword would be completely useless in battle. The man agreed with her, saying that perhaps this was indeed the case, and then asked what she would say if she found out that the sword was made from goblin skeletons. His words caused great surprise in Alice. The blacksmith continued, adding that all the materials were in worse condition, and that it was done by a man who had only just picked up a hammer for the time that day. Alice smiled crookedly and asked with disbelief in her voice if he had really decided to get an apprentice. Victor looked away and said with displeasure that he had tried to make such a proposal. The first moment Killian picked up the hammer, he realized that he was too good for a beginner. In his memory, no one had ever been able to reach such a level from the first days, except for that guy. The man sighed and admitted that the hero had refused the offer to become his student, which caused even more surprise in the girl. She frowned and cast an appraising glance at the boy, who was still busy forging weapons. Killian didn't look away from his work for a second. Completely absorbed in it, he didn't even pay attention to the conversations of the two. Alice kept her gaze fixed on him the whole time. 2 hours later, another blade was ready, the appearance of which was significantly better than all the other unsuccessful attempts. But despite this, Killian's face showed dissatisfaction due to the fact that his metallurgy skill was pumping up too slowly. Over the past time, he had only managed to master it by 0.7%. Deciding not to dwell on it, he wondered how he could now sell the weapon he had created. At that moment, Alice approached him, drawing his attention to herself. Then she extended her palm to him and introduced herself as a representative of Company S. Killian recalled that the company specialized in the hunting business and considered its core value to be trust and reliability, which is why it became widely known among hunters. The girl smiled and said that they only worked with the best goods, so if he was thinking about selling this weapon, she offered her services. The hero was delighted with such a fortunate opportunity and also smiled broadly, asking how much money she was willing to offer him. Thus, he managed to make a very successful deal with Alice. Killian returned to forging weapons and began to work even harder. When he ran out of materials, he would go out on his own to hunt various monsters and return to his work. Alicia continued to do her job as a company representative, actively promoting Killian's, and so, a few days later, she visited Victor's workshop again. The girl was beside herself with happiness, Approaching the hero, she happily announced that thanks to him, they were able to sign a contract with the T Group. When he said that he had done nothing special, an overly emotional Alice said that due to the impeccable quality and adherence to delivery dates, they had managed to avoid major problems. Then she took his hands in hers and said that if he needed anything, she would do everything possible to get it. As she spoke, the girl suddenly remembered something and reached for her phone, asking Killian to check his account. Surprised by her request, the hero looked at the phone screen. When he saw the amount of 2,801 displayed there, he said in disappointment that it was less than he expected to see. Alice gave him a puzzled look and asked him to double-check the amount in his account. He opened the latest transfer message and saw the amount of 280 million and won. At the sight of such an impressive sum, our hero's heart began to beat faster with happiness, and a joyful smile spread across his face. That's all for today, guys. See you on the next upload.